Remember them? White Chicks was the fun-loving comedy with an unlikely plot. Two black men working as FBI agents that went undercover as white women in order to solve a case. They took the adage, what you see is not what you get, to a completely different level. I'm Ronnie Gladden, and I am an English professor and entrepreneur. And amongst other things, I like to study the intersection of popular culture, literature, and authentic leadership. And as it turns out, I am authentically drawn to the movie White Chicks, but unlike the Wayans brothers, who presented as white women while clearly being black men underneath all of the garb, I am the opposite. I present as black and male, yet internally, I possess a white girl within. I suppose that I'm trying to process my own case as my life collides with art. I primarily identify as white and female, no meme. So I'm not expecting you as the audience to begin to immediately process that disclosure. I recognize that that can be quite an imposition. Pain points are definitely connected to gender, and especially with regard to race. But I think we've reached a critical moment in our society to process that pain so that we can see more of the complexity and fullness of our humanity. This is not about cultural appropriation. I'd say it's a lot closer to cultural appreciation. And dare I even say, this is a kind of authentic repatriation. And this is certainly not about emasculating black men or men in particular. But what this is doing is shining a light on complex intersectional identity. I first recognized my truth when I was 4 years old. Back then, I knew that I was drawn to the white female aesthetic. I magnetically connected with the hair texture, the skin complexion, the bone structure, the social cues, and the mathematics of that all. It just seemed to me that that was the right kind of avatar that would help me to animate this experience that we call life. Said another way, effectively, it was the comfortable t-shirt and jeans, leggings, or sandals that just you could throw on and go about your life and do your business. In kindergarten, I knew then that the mapping of my mind and instincts, again, aligned best with the white female aesthetic. And with the years that came, I had a connection with Kimmy Gibbler of all sorts in Full House. I saw my reflection in that character. I saw my reflection in Joan Jett, the rock star. I saw my reflection in Anne Hathaway, believe it or not, Bea Arthur as well too. Effectively, this has been insistent, consistent, and persistent throughout the years. I share in on what is known as the feminine essence narrative, which is true for many male to female individuals of transgender experience. But yet there's been the overlapping trans-racial story as well that's been interconnected with my truth. Through my research, I've discovered that the totality of that is transgressial theory. And that's where the transgender identity construction overlaps with the transracial identity construction. They both intersect. And surprisingly, it turns out that I'm not alone. As we've seen throughout the years, more people are coming forward with their authentic identities, both where life and art intersect. And a lot of these cultural representations have been hiding in plain sight effectively the entire time. For instance, when I think of art, there are a few people I want to discuss, but just to preface, all of these actors have not gone on record as identifying as transgressial. but nonetheless, they have depicted characters that do seem to align with that theoretical framework. As you can see, there's Anthony Mackie, proud black male actor Anthony Mackie, and there's a series, Black Mirror. You might have seen one of the episodes called Striking Vipers, where he ends up portraying an Asian female in this alternate universe. Now, there is actually a real Asian female that ended up playing the other half of the character, but the totality of their work does show a sort of a transgresstional representation. There's also proud black female comedian and actor Whoopi Goldberg inside of the movie The Associate, and she portrays a white male. And believe it or not, that is actually Whoopi Goldberg in both guises. There's also, too, Jennifer Lawrence, and she's played Mystique inside of the Marvel series, and she's a proud white female actor. But through her character Mystique, she was able to represent an amalgamation of different kinds of races, ethnicities, and even species. It's quite the intersectionality. In real life, there's a study, a piloted study outside of Germany by Solster and Kasten, and it features 14 transgender and actually transracial identified people, primarily transracial identified people. And what it shows is that they have allegiances with various types of races and ethnicities that run counter to how they were assigned at birth. With these examples, it seems clear that DNA does not make the person, but their story does. Their truth does, their authentic identity and their expression does. And in this way, identity rights are human rights. This is a call for us to embrace our inner diversity. When we embrace our inner diversity, we're able to confront our own shadow. We can shine the light on that silhouette and begin important integrative work. Embrace the diversity living inside of us to embrace the diversity living outside of us. This is a call for more self-acceptance. There are actually many studies that speak to the value of self-acceptance and how there is a positive correlation with general mental health and well-being, and that includes a Harvard study. Prominent psychotherapist Annie Wright has written about the value of aligning one's interiority with their exteriority. In other words, making sure that the inside life matches the outside life. It's good to craft that. Prominent TED speaker Dr. Brené Brown has shown us and validated through lots of research of the power of owning one's vulnerability and in time entering into the proverbial arena to dare greatly. And I suppose I'm answering that call. Here I am in the arena, sharing my message, sharing my story with you all with the hope of more impact and more transformation. And I ask you, as the audience, when is the last time that you thoroughly thought about the fullness and the complexity and the depth and the range of your own humanity? Might it be that you or someone you know embodies a kind of polarity that may run counter, directly opposite to how they may appear outwardly? We're in the midst of a global disruption right now. This is quite the reset, to say the very least. We're almost on the other side of this thing. So it seems like we would be in good form to go on the other side of this, interacting better with ourselves as well as with other people. And as we make that attempt, I have a few general suggestions that I think that may actually help us to foster in that process, and it is the now process. Name it, own it, work it. Step one is just that, name it. Reflect back on the arc of your life that is your own story. Chaminade Ngozi Adichie warned us about the danger of the single story. And the single story is the incomplete story, the one-dimensional story, the unfinished story. So look at your own life, scan it for patterns, and see where you may be able to make an important classification. For me, the transgressial classification makes sense at this time, but what is it for you? Second is to own it. Take authority of your narrative and begin the work of revising it so that you can implement other tenets to more fully reflect the authenticity of your life. That could include journaling. That could include processing those pain points, as I mentioned earlier. Hemingway said to write clear and hard about what hurts. Third would simply be to work it. Look at the newly formed narrative that is your life and begin to see how you can make an enhanced synthesis so that you are able to project an interior alignment with the exterior alignment. Now, if you're like me, this process starts individually, but as you grow in this pursuit, you may see the value of actually working with a mental health professional. Name it, own it, work it. That is the now process, and now is an excellent time to redouble our efforts for more self-reflection, as well as to self-integrate so that we can embrace the diversity. In fact, the now process forms the backbone to authentic leadership, which calls for sharing our story, for more synthesis and for more consensus amongst those that are near us. And now is an excellent time because we're so divided politically and socially, as you know. There's much tension there, much hostility, and lots of contradictory signals about how we want to work with diversity. And we've hunkered down in our own digital silos as of late, too. And it's likely we've been exposed to an echo chamber that may have cut into our time for more self-reflection. Eventually, we'll have to reemerge from those spaces and return to the global village. And when we do so, we'll be charged with having to interact with a number of different people, different sensibilities, and that's quite the undertaking if we haven't all fully integrated with ourselves in the way that's needed most. This is the next level of diversity, equity, and inclusion. This is important cultural competence. It's absolutely needed. Remember, identity rights are absolutely human rights, and embracing our inner diversity is essential in that regard. So, in conclusion, you may not exactly be like the Wayans brothers who were undercover, and you may not exactly possess a white girl within, but it could be that either you or someone else that you know does have a kind of polarity on the inside that may look very different with how they live and present on the outside. Indeed, life and art may very well intersect for you or for someone else that you know. And then you are effectively working to solve your own kind of identity case. It takes just months to form a human, but it can take decades, if not a full lifetime, to draw the full range of the humanity out of the person. Embrace the diversity living inside of us in order to embrace the diversity living outside of us. Now is an excellent time to recommit to that. We know that identity rights indeed are human rights, and the need to embrace our inner diversity is critical. Society depends on it. Thank you.